Good afternoon all, and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Cabinet meeting taking place today on the 20th of October 2022. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett, Chair of the meeting as the leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. Before we begin, may I just repeat a few housekeeping issues. To remind all present that under the Council's multi-locations policy, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for archive purposes on the Vale of Glamorgan Council website. Cabinet members, please can you have your camera on at all times? Should you wish to speak, please raise your hand on screen or indicate it in the online function. For the benefit of those viewing online, the use of the chat facility is limited to ensure that all the discussions take place in the meeting itself. But Cabinet members are able to use that function to raise any issues in relation to audio or camera use. With regard to voting on recommendations, I'll normally ask if we're all in agreement, but if there's no dissent to a recommendation, I'll accept the silence as agreement. So we've gone through those. If we go on to the agenda proper, and the first agenda item is apologies for absence. I can see a lot of smiling faces on the screen, so I'm assuming that there are none today. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is minutes of the meetings held on the 29th of September and the 6th of October, because we had meetings 2 weeks running. I'll move them as a true reflection of the meetings. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Leader.
And Rhiannon as well, so that's great. Everyone, no dissents, everyone's in agreement. Agenda item 3. Declarations of interest. Do we have any today? No. And now I'm going to make a slight alteration to the running order of the agenda. I can see people smiling because it's normally where I go drastically wrong. I'm aware that Councillor Birch has got an urgent family situation that you need to deal with. So I am actually going to move agenda item 11 up to the top of the agenda so that we can deal with that. So without further ado, if we can take the report from the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language. That's an update on community benefits and sustainability outcomes of Band B of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to provide Cabinet with an update on the community benefits and sustainability outcomes of Band B of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme to date. So it's going to provide an update on high-level targets and examples of community benefits delivery by the Sustainable Communities for Learning team and the appointed contractors and the consultants of the Barry Secondary Learning Communities, Centre for Learning and Wellbeing, Expansion of Ysgol Cowbridge Primary Provision and Western Vale Primaries projects. Between January 2019 to August 2022, the Band B projects have delivered the following: over 12,500 person weeks of new entrant jobs with 158 new full-time jobs, over 7,000 person weeks of new entrant training, including 104 apprenticeships and 32 work experience placements, over 3,000 hours of school STEM engagements, reaching over 11,000 pupils, 26 supply chain engagement events, an average of 99% of construction waste avoiding landfill, and an average of 82% construction spend within Wales, with 85% of subcontractors based in Wales and 50% of the workforce coming from the local postcode. We'll also provide an update on how the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme is considering and implementing sustainability within its current schemes and future work to be delivered by 2024. All our new build schools are designed to meet BREEAM Excellent standard, which includes delivering energy efficient buildings and enhancing habitats for wildlife. From January 22, all new school buildings will also be net zero carbon in operation, with aims to improve embodied carbon year on year. And if you haven't been to South Point Primary to have a look at it, I strongly recommend that you do so. I was absolutely fascinated, mostly by the huge cells that they use for storage in one of their kind of cellars. It was the most interesting part. Made me wish I'd done science in school with some enthusiasm. The Sustainable Communities for Learning programme monitors a range of sustainability outcomes post-occupancy, including educational attainment, energy consumption and community use of facilities. The Council has also been working on a process to approach sustainability more holistically, and in particular to decarbonise our new school buildings with consideration of the whole life cycle. The overarching aim is to achieve net zero carbon in future projects. To further embed sustainability and wellbeing, the Council has developed a directory in collaboration with Constructing Excellence in Wales, other industry partners, and the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner to help integrate the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 into the design and delivery process. So there are 4 recommendations, and I'd like to take them one at a time, please. That Cabinet note the progress towards community benefits targets made by the Sustainable Communities for Learning team and the appointed contractors and consultants of the Barry Secondary Learning Communities and Western Vale Primary schemes set out in the report. Be happy with that? Next, the Cabinet note the sustainability measures already put in place within the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme and progress towards further measures to be implemented in future schemes. The Cabinet refer the report to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee for consideration with regards to the delivery of community benefits for existing and future Sustainable Communities for Learning schemes. And lastly, the Cabinet write to each of the contractors, thanking them for their work and efforts in contributing to this incredibly successful scheme. I won't name any individuals, but there are some people who are absolutely stellar performance in this regard. And I think most of us who've been involved will know who they are. So if you're happy to accept those recommendations.
Thanks, Rhiannon.
Thank you.
I'm incredibly happy to second it. And as you're aware, I mean, I think that the performance on these schools has been phenomenal. The contractors that we've worked with, and you know, I will mention them, is Bouygues, ISG, Morgan Sindall, and also AECOM that do the project management and quantity surveying, etc. And also more recently, although they're not directly contracted by us, Galliford Try, that are undertaking the waterfront school. Actually, they have been talking to us about community benefits and the types of things that they do, and are actually starting to look at the types of approach that we adopt. I think that, you know, you mentioned some of the outcomes on this, and when you look at 158 brand new full-time jobs, local jobs that have been delivered, 104 apprenticeships. These are people, and also the businesses have worked closely together. So apprentices have moved from one school to another, so that they've been able to continue their development. Because sometimes with the nature of construction, people would do a year of their apprenticeship and then they wouldn't have a job to continue the next bit, and the schools have collaborated. The way that they've worked with Box Boyd, with Ysgol to provide the canteen facilities. And again, that canteen has moved from school to school to provide work experience for the young people with those. And it is sector leading, the work that has been done through this. And having been to 2 of our major employers, Renishaw by Miskin and Aston Martin recently, and one of the things that they are very keen on is promoting STEM education, you know, science, technology, etc. Education, and to provide experiences to 11,000 of our pupils over this period as well, to hopefully make this sort of work relevant to them. And when you talked about South Point, to have the young people using the QR codes on the wooden tiles and explaining to us how their own school works. That, you know, there are a number of people now, including people from Renishaw and Aston Martin, who want to come and see South Point. So yeah, phenomenal report, and hopefully there'll be a presentation to go with it at scrutiny when it goes, so that we can spread the word. This is part of our approach. This is community wealth building in action. So thank you for bringing this report. So I think everyone was nodding. Are we all happy with this report? Super.
Yes, and can I just say, those of you in the cabinet who have not yet been to South Point, or the one that we're building down on the dock, you should go and see it, because it's something we're going to be referring to time and again. It's just an incredible building, and as Liz says, the ability of the children to be able to explain to us how it works is amazing. Having gone to a Victorian school where all you knew is whether it was cold or not, is you know, to see these children so integrated into the way that they're learning and where they're learning is absolutely phenomenal. I consider myself very lucky to have the portfolio. Thank you.
I know you had to wrestle it off me. No, thank you, Rhiannon, and I hope all gets sorted. When you have to deal with it, I think you've got a couple of minutes. So right, I will get myself organised and go back to the start so that we'll stay in order now, and we'll go back to the references on the agenda. These are discussions that have been had in various committees around the council, and the first reference is agenda item 4, and that was when the Governance and Audit Committee discussed the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment 2021-22. Now, funny enough, we've actually got a number of references all where people have been discussing this report. So looking at agenda item 4, one of the things that was actually raised was the fact that this is a retrospective report. So we're looking at outcomes which are up to last April. So there is a bit of a challenge there in making that relevant to the current day as well. So there was some discussion in committee around that. There was also a bit of a discussion about whether or not we need to put a sort of a direction of travel indicator within the report, so people can see whether or not we're improving performance or otherwise. But in essence, the Governance and Audit Committee, in referring this to Cabinet for consideration, they said that their views were that more narrative related to the actions in supporting the basic needs of vulnerable groups as a result of the cost of living crisis. So they want a sort of more background information, more explanation in terms of vulnerable groups. And I think that's something that we'll be talking a little bit about later. And they also wanted greater reference to the proposals for the redevelopment of the former Aberthaw power station. So both of those we've taken on board. So for this report, it's really, because we're going to be revisiting this later on in the agenda, this would be for noting. So I would move we note. Is anyone happy to second that?
I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Are we all happy with that? Yep. Agenda item 5, and this is a reference from the Governance and Audit Committee on 27th September, and this is the Corporate Complaints Annual Report. This is something, as I said, which comes to us annually, and this one actually also includes the Ombudsman's, local government Ombudsman's annual letter as well. I'm just finding that in my papers. Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, sorry. Their letter in terms of the complaints that they had received. In terms of the overall complaints, I don't think that any complaints as is ever, where you can say, well, it's that's okay then. We'd obviously be wanting to move to a point where we minimised any complaints. The ones in terms of the report, the ones that were received are fairly well in terms with the long-term trend. The figures that were quoted for, I think there's a typo here. Yes, there must be. There's a typo on the. I'm just about to read it, and I'm thinking, no, it's wrong. Last but one paragraph says it analysis of complaints information for 2022-23. Well, no, it would be 2021-22 because we're not at 2022-23 yet. Indicated that the number of complaints received, which was 358, were in line with the long-term trend, averaging 377. Overall, complainants were satisfied with how they were investigated. The responsiveness in terms of adherence to deadlines continued to decline. The complaint handling was meeting the requirements of statutory bodies. An increased focus on learning from complaints was required. So that's the feedback from the Governance and Audit Committee. In terms of the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, there were 61 complaints, which was an increase. However, only 2 complaints were taken into investigation, one of which was upheld, and one was partially upheld. I think from my perspective, it would actually be quite interesting to get an idea of how many interactions we would be having with residents of the Vale on an annual basis, in terms of what percentage of our annual interactions with local residents this represented, over the huge range of services. And it's something that I would like to discuss in a later report as well, in terms of the communication that we have as a part of the complaints process with public, because quite often there are degrees of misunderstanding over these conversations. So in terms of what Governance and Audit did with this report, they resolved that the contents of the report be noted, and that they continue to receive an annual update, which is usual for them. That the annual letter from the Ombudsman, Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, be noted, and that the report be referred to Cabinet for our consideration. And that's where we are today. So in terms of us, I think that we should note the comments of the Governance and Audit Committee, and review and take note of their findings in relation to the annual self-assessment as it goes forward, in terms of our learning and what we can achieve in handling complaints, and also with communications with members of the public in terms of our work. As I said, that's actually going to be relevant to the work that we take forward. So are we happy to note this report?
Yeah. I'll second that, Leader.
Bronwyn second. Can note that. Agenda item 6 is another reference from the Governance and Audit Committee, and this is in relation to Public Service Ombudsman for Wales homelessness reviewed, an open door to positive change action on suggested recommendations to non-investigated authorities. And what that basically means is that the Public Service Ombudsman Wales published their own initiative investigation, which was homelessness reviewed, an open door to positive change. That was back in October 2021. And they investigated a number of local authorities. And in addition to the 6 specific recommendations made to the 3 investigated local authorities, which were Cardiff, Carmarthenshire and Wrexham, the report also invited the remaining 19 local authorities to comply with 4 recommendations. And those specifically related to making arrangements at an all Wales level to discuss and improve consistency of the review process, creating working relationships with stakeholder partner agencies, such as Take Notice, to help improve services, formulating a framework in conjunction with advocacy groups which will empower officers to make decisions and take action, particularly in relation to human rights and equality, and reduce unnecessary reviews without impacting upon the client's statutory right to review, considering and finally considering the recommendations made to the 3 investigated authorities to take forward any learning points that would improve their service provision. Appendix A details a recent request from the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, and Appendix B outlines the Council's progress to date in addressing these recommendations. So Public Service Ombudsman wrote to all non-investigated authorities, and said in Appendix B that actually lays out what we've done in relation to those. So this was sent to us from the Governance and Audit Committee for our consideration, and after they've noted it, and so they asked for us to consider and endorse the progress. So therefore I would move that we do just that, is we endorse the progress that's been made to date on the homelessness reviewed report and recommendations, and endorse the progress. So are we happy to agree with that?
Second that, Leader, yeah.
Yeah, Bronwyn seconded it. So, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment, agenda item 7 is the reference from the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee. And in their discussion of the report, they recommended that the committee's views and recommendations be referred to Cabinet for their consideration prior to the final Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment report being considered by Governance and Audit Committee and presented for endorsement by Council, and namely that the key emerging challenges around housing and related issues within the Vale of Glamorgan are given due consideration when formulating the Council's annual delivery plan and general performance priorities through areas for future focus, in order that these can be addressed effectively. So in essence, the Scrutiny Committee is asking us to be mindful of housing issues and the key and emerging themes. So we're happy to note that reference. Yeah.
Second that.
Thanks, Bronwyn. And then the same report has been considered by Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. That was on the 12th of October. and there was actually quite a detailed discussion on this, and as you might imagine, corporate performance and resources got into the detail of the report. So there were a number of sort of areas of just checking details, etc. A lot of discussion around making the information in the report more accessible, and I would concur with that. And again, as I said, when we come to discuss the final draft of that report, there are some points that I'd like to make. So the committee they've actually recommended that it be referred to Cabinet for their consideration prior to the final Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment report being considered by Governance and Audit Committee and presented for endorsement by full council. And that's what they agreed, and that's the process that we follow. But they were concerned about the need to use plain English or plain language, in effect, remove jargon, make it more accessible. Absolutely, I mean, that's something I think that we would all agree with. The need to revisit and look at some of the data within the report, and I think that is ongoing. So we would be keen to continue to look at that. So thank them for their thoughts on that, and also, and I'm assuming that this will be taken, is the need to revisit and review the classification of those relevant age groups known not to be in education, training or employment, referred to separately by their specific age group. I think that will be looked at. The one thing that I would say with that is, as a group, those that are assessed as being not in an employment, educational training, so categorised as NEET, it's a very, very important 3-year period, so that they are pupils from sort of 16 up to 18. So the ones that are just leaving school after GCSEs, first year in the sixth form, year 12, year 13. It's where young people can drop out of the system quite easily, so that if you amalgamate all those figures, you might lose people that maybe were successful in their GCSEs, but that sixth form didn't suit them, that maybe would suit an apprenticeship more. It might be that they drop out after first year 6 because they haven't been happy with their experience or whatever. So I think the wider figures are good, but to actually have it disaggregated down to that level in terms of age helps us to understand whether or not there are any other steps we can take to support our young people. And I think potentially, I wish I'd picked it up at the time, potentially it's also why we have got such low levels of young people that are NEET, and that our inclusion team and our youth services have been so successful in supporting young people in those age groups. So hopefully there will be a response back, but sometimes lumping everything together isn't the most productive way forward. So I think we note those recommendations and add them to the rest going forward. So I'll move we note. Is everyone happy?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Great. Then we're on to agenda item 9. This is one of my reports, and I need to clarify, this is the final draft Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment report. The references that we've just been looking at are the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment. So this is the next step on. Having been to all scrutiny committees, having been to governance and audit, it's now come back to us as the final draft. And it draws on a very wide range of information sources, and that includes, in some ways, stuff that wasn't available to scrutiny committees, is views of stakeholders, you know, in their views of our progress towards meeting the annual delivery plan commitments, and also some of the consultations that happened as well. So, as I said, in line with our new performance duties, and also because it's something we would want to be doing anyway, we've engaged with key stakeholders and asked them what they think of our achievements, and that's contained within the report. A programme of engagement activities was undertaken during August to October of this year, and that was targeting a whole range of different people. That's young local people, council staff, other key stakeholders, etc. There's a summary of consultation findings. That's Appendix B, and it's interesting because that presents a mixed picture. It's not a one size fits all. So whereas public respondents were positive about the councillors providing care and support and improving infrastructure, but they were least positive about, you know, what we're doing in terms of responding to climate change challenge. That's the Project Zero work, and the cost of living crisis. So that's learning for us, and it's we need to be looking more at how we communicate that, how we have a dialogue with you know, residents within the Vale of Glamorgan. Council staff were also most positive about providing care and support, and again, Project Zero featured lower down their level of responses and how we involve our communities. Most people felt that our wellbeing objectives remain relevant. But one thing I think that really concerns me is the assertion that it's from the public survey analysis. It seems to demonstrate that there's a general lack of awareness and understanding of what the council does, and we need to do a lot more about how we communicate that, because there are two sides to that. One is, quite often, if there's something wrong, it must be the council's fault, and it might be something that we actually don't do. So there is a degree of frustration when we say, well, actually, that's outside our remit. But we should be able to signpost people to the right area. But the other side of it, which is potentially more serious, is if people don't understand what we do, are people missing an opportunity to get support from us? If they don't know how to navigate the maze that is life or public services, etc. So I think that's something that we do need to look at. We do need to look, and I can see Councillor Sivan-Yarnam looking very serious there, because that will probably come under her portfolio. So, but I know that you've been doing a tremendous amount of work recently exactly on that topic. So, but overall, it's a good picture overall, based on the review of last year's performance and the findings from our consultation work with citizens, partners, council staff, other statutory bodies, etc. We believe that on balance, we have met our annual delivery plan commitments for 2021-22. In what we have to say, continued to be a challenging year for the council. I don't think next year will be any less challenging, but overall in the last one we did, which bodes well. So in terms of the recommendations, because as I said, the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment has already gone right the way around scrutiny committees, etc. It's now back to us for our final draft, but it doesn't stop here. We need to consider it today. If we pass it, it actually goes back as a final draft to Governance and Audit Committee. If they have no comments, it will go to full council for endorsement. If they have got comments, it will come back to us again before ultimately going to full council. So it is a complicated process, but it is designed to make sure that we leave no stone unturned in ensuring that we have fully considered our performance over the last year. So the three recommendations, and I will read them all because they're a bit complicated. The three recommendations before us are, firstly, that Cabinet considers the consultation summary findings, that's Appendix B, reviews and endorses the updated final draft of Vale of Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment Report 2021-22 appended Appendix A. Secondly, that Cabinet refers the final draft Vale of Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment Report to Governance and Audit Committee, and that will be on the 24th of October, for their consideration and approval in line with their statutory role under Part 6, Section 114 of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, and that upon consideration, the committee refers any recommendations back to Cabinet for their final consideration. That will be on the 3rd of November 2022. Prior to Cabinet referring this report, the comments of the Governance and Audit Committee and Cabinet's responses to Council on the 9th of November 2022 for consideration and approval. I said if they don't make any comments, then it won't come back to us. Should Governance and Audit Committee make no further comments, as I said, regarding the draft Vale of Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment 2021-22, Cabinet would consider the draft Vale of Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment 2021-22 as agreed and refer the matter to full council. So if there are no comments from Governance and Audit Committee, this report as is will just go straight to full council. And finally, because we need to get it onto Governance and Audit for the 24th of October, that the use of paragraph 15.14.2 brackets II of the Council's Constitution, that's the urgent decision procedure, be authorised to allow the final draft Vale of Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment 2021-22 to be referred to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting taking place on 24th of October 2022 for consideration, with any recommendations considered by Cabinet on the 3rd of November 2022 if required, prior to full council consideration on the 9th of November 2022. Sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful, but I wanted to make sure it was all completely set out. So I'll move those three recommendations.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you. Everyone happy? Any comments, anyone? Or no? Super. Then we'll move on to agenda item 10. And this is on to this year's annual delivery plan, and it's the monitoring report for the Q1 performance. So that's from the 1st of April 2022 to the 30th of June 2022. And this is fairly straightforward. It's the first 3 months of the year. And if you look at the report, it's been all around the scrutiny committees before it's come to us. And if you look at paragraph 2.7 through to 2.13, actually 2.7 actually to 2.11, those are the performance summaries by scrutiny committee. So that's where we are in relation to that. And as laid out, paragraphs 2.14 up to 2.20, all scrutiny committees have noted the performance results and progress to date in relation to the annual delivery plan, without any major comments. So on that note, unless anyone's got any specific comments about their areas, the recommendations before us today are that Cabinet considers the views and recommendations of scrutiny committees in relation to Q1 performance and approval of identified remedial actions as the basis to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified. Secondly, that Cabinet notes overall service performance results to date and progress made towards achieving the priorities in our annual delivery plan 2022. And I'd move.
And I'll second that, Leader.
And everyone's nodding, so that's fine. I have remembered that we've already done agenda item 11, so that's okay. So moving on to agenda item 12, and it's a report from the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services related to the maintenance of traffic signal equipment contract. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader. And can I say I'm happy to bring this report to Cabinet. And this report, as you rightly said, is about the maintenance of traffic signal equipment. Now, obviously, traffic signal equipment is vital, isn't it? Because obviously, within our road network can only really function well if it is safe for us to use it. And I'm not just talking about car users and people that drive vehicles, but I'm also talking about passengers and cyclists. So it's very much important in terms of active travel, not just in terms of people travel using four wheels, as in many cases. So traffic signalling does rely on it being properly maintained. Now, for anyone who's listening, watching this online as on live on stream, that obviously some reports we have to council have what we call two parts. We have a part one report and a part two report. Now, the part one report is what we call the public part of it. So I can't really go into great detail in terms of the contractor, but obviously there was a tendering process that occurred. And what I can say under the part one is that a contractor called Centigrade won the contract, but we can't really go into detail until we move what we call part two. So I'm just going to move that we note the report on part one, and then we go into detail when we look at Centigrade and what they put in their tender process under part two. So I'm just moved that we note that, and I'm looking for someone to second that.
I'm happy to second that, Mark.
Thank
Everyone
you.
in agreement? Yeah, we're okay on that. Thank you. Then over to agenda item 13, and that's the Cabinet Member for Public Sector Housing and Tenant Engagement, who's got a report on tenant engagement. So it's the Tenant and Leaseholder Participation Strategy 2022 to 2025. Over to you, Margaret. You're muted at the moment.
Thank you, Leader. Trust me, this is an important tenants and leaseholders strategy. It's a very important one, and I'm happy to say we are moving forward with quite a lot of what we're doing is very interesting. The draft tenants leaseholder strategy 22 to 25 was presented to Cabinet on the 20th of December 21. Cabinet recommended that the strategy and the qualities impact assessment be referred to Homes and Safety Community Scrutiny for their consideration. On their consideration, they were quite happy with everything, and consideration is being given to everything, and they are ready to let it be approved and adopted. Can I just turn to a certain parts of this, because I think we are now engaging with more tenants and leaseholders and private tenants completely, and we are having events in this building, in the civic offices and in the Memorial Hall to encourage more tenants and leaseholders to get involved, and they seem to be very interested. On Tuesday there was an event in the Memorial Hall, not only just for the tenants, but for everybody else that was interested. They wanted to find out about information, how they got onto the housing list, or if they had problems with poverty or money or anything like that. And there was a lot of organisations there as well. So I was quite happy with that. And you'll see there's quite a lot of things happening, especially in St Luke's and St Paul's Estate in Penarth, and they've been involved with their community for a while. But yesterday we were up Margaret Avenue, Calcutta, with the children and the residents, who has changed a piece of land into a community garden, and it's called the Garden for Everyone. And the Calcutta School is heavily involved, and all the residents around there as well. And yesterday it was a lovely afternoon, and they engaged with everything that was going on. There was different people there, and they cannot wait until they can use it for all kinds. They are growing plants, and there is games, things, and people just come there to sit quiet and reflect. And I'm quite happy to move the recommendations, and there is 2, I believe. The Cabinet adopts the tenants and leaseholders I can't say that word, participatory strategy 2022 to 25 attached in Appendix 1, and the equality impact assessment attached at Appendix 2. That the Cabinet agrees to consider it being given to widen the scope for engagement with tenants and leaseholders. So can I please have your support? Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I can
Mark.
see
Mark.
I can see that Mark's got his hand up. So yes, Mark, do you want to come in?
Yes, I'm very happy to support this. I think this is an excellent strategy, and I'd like to also comment about some of the works that have been going on in St Paul's and St Luke's. As you know, many of you know that myself and Councillor Liz Burnett, the leader of the council, but this is in our ward, and we're very fortunate to have St Luke's and St Paul's in our ward, because the tenants there and the leaseholders really participate very well in that community. And it's very much, it's been a long-term engagement with us, and it's been going on for some considerable period of time. And we've been very fortunate in the last sort of 8 or 9 years that we've had a pod, and we've got another pod called the Food Pod. And that's done some marvellous work, and it's helping to alleviate some of the cost of living issues that we got at the moment, as you know, which are still ongoing. And really that's come about because we have tried to listen to the needs and the wishes of the people that live in that area. And I think that is vital. And I think it's vital that also by having such a strategy, it results in a genuine partnership between us as being community representatives and also the tenants and the leaseholders that live in that area. After all, they are very much our eyes and ears in those areas, and it's important that we do listen to them and respond to them. But also, we also develop a view that they also say what they can do for us as well, because it's very much a partnership. So, and that's got to continue. And I think we're right to widen the scope, because as you know, because of previous policies of previous governments, an awful lot of people now have what we call the right to buy over a number of years. But there's still quite a lot of people on those estates who are still council tenants in other areas of Penarth and in Barry and other areas, which would like also to participate. And I think it's important that we do widen the scope to include those people as well. Although sometimes there's a bit more disparate in terms of that population, but nevertheless, it's important that we listen to them. We have done, as a council, marvellous work under WHQS and the Welsh Housing Quality Standards to improve housing and insulation, which I'm sure many will benefit to try and reduce some of their bills. And I know that that's going to carry on further with the WHQS2, which I know will come to Cabinet at a later stage over the next few years. So it is important that we do regularly engage with the community over this. So I'm happy to second and support and endorse this strategy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super, thanks, Mark. If you hadn't seconded, I would have. But yes, no, I think some really, really interesting work that's going on with our housing team at the moment, and it's lovely to see the constructive discussions and dialogues that go on between them and tenants in terms of hopefully helping to deliver and improve services in the future. So yeah, thank you. Is everybody happy with that? I think everyone was nodding. Great. So moving on to agenda item 14, and this is one for the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health. Hugely important, unpaid carers. I don't know what we would do without them. So over to you, Eddie, with the Regional Unpaid Carers Charter.
Thank you, Leader. As you say, the report is one of those. It on the face of it, you know, you don't look at the detail. You look at what's behind what we're trying to achieve. So, the purpose of this report is to approve the Regional Unpaid Carers Charter and the Regional Young Carers Charter. The report provides an overview of the work of the Regional Partnership Board in relation to unpaid carers, including young carers. And draft versions of the Unpaid Carers Charter and the Young Carers Charter were considered by the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee on 6th of September 2022. You look at the background, we're in it's a regional charter because we're in partnership with Vale of Glamorgan Council, with Cardiff Council, Cardiff Vale University Health Board, and working together jointly with to oversee the development of this, with in particular integrated health and social care services across the region. So it's not just local to the Vale of Glamorgan, and it's what it also does is recognises that we have within our own authority particular needs, but then it's not just within our authority that we've got some of the issues that have come up. And so it was important, particularly through this producing the charters, that we actually engage with the people that we were actually producing the charter for. So the work from the partnership board, they went to the actual carers themselves, identified them, and just took on their views and what their needs are. And it's important that we recognise the challenges that carers, you know, unpaid carers in particular, are unseen generally. And yet, as you mentioned about the economy, the benefits to the economy are unseen. And in the appendix, it talks about not just in tens of pounds, thousands, but in you know, millions that the benefits to the economy because of the work that they do. You'll notice in the background to the report that the chart's been produced. They give commitments, and it's easy to say what those commitments are, and it'll be a challenge for us to actually to work through them. We know there's challenging resources and people to support them, but the point that this does is that it puts on a document something which, as a charter, that the carers, unpaid carers, can actually put together and say, look, you've made a commitment, what are you going to do about it? And because of the differences between young people, unpaid care, and others, is that there are two charters, and they're written in different ways with set commitments. So they're as part of the report. What I would like also to thank is the Health and Living and Social Care Screening Committee, because they provided some helpful feedback in the chart and the companion document that were part of this, highlighting the financial impact of caring and ensuring that was understood. So the charters with the report, the accompanying document, companion document, gives now a line of what the Regional Partnership Board have been doing and trying to get this going forward. And as I said, is a recognition that the needs and issues that we're dealing with are not just local, but it's a regional and I would suggest national as well. But at least it's on the table and be utilised for future use. On that basis, then, I would like to recommend that the Cabinet approves the draft Regional Unpaid Carers Charter, which is in Appendix 1, and the draft Regional Young Carers Charter, Appendix 2. And then the second recommendation is the Cabinet notes the draft companion document, but it's been produced to support the charters, and that gives an outline of what the charters are intended to do. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Gwyn, I can see you've got your hand up. Did you want to make a
Yes.
comment?
Thank you, Leader, very much. It's a very important document and I'm pleased to support it. Quite honestly, unpaid carers, they never think of payment or anything like that. They usually arrive by looking after a loved one with all their needs, and or they may look after a friend or whatever, but they do a fantastic amount of work for looking after their loved ones, because without the unpaid carers, our society would be in a dreadful mess. And quite honestly, the work they do, I can only applaud. And I'm delighted, Leader, to support this document today. And thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ruba, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Eddie, for bringing this. I mean, it's incredibly important. You know, as Gwyn's just outlined, that the cost to the society that unpaid carers provide is tremendous in terms of, you know, the financial contribution, which obviously they're unpaid, but for us it's huge as a society. But I think also importantly what this charter does for me is acknowledge carers as human beings in society whose own needs are often subsumed to the person they're caring for, and this is validating you know, not only what they do, but they're, you know, carers as people who are making a valid contribution to our society. So I wholeheartedly support this charter, Eddie, and thank you.
Thank you.
Ruba. Yeah, I was looking at the, you know, looking at the figures. Over 50,000. This affects over 50,000 people in Cardiff and the Vale.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we can go back to so much that we've been talking about today and say, how do we make sure that these people understand everything that is available? How, whether or not there are any services to support them, you know, no matter how, we might think small, whatever, but supportive. What information is there available? And then also when we were looking at the community benefit stuff in schools, having jobs close to home so that you can actually fit your lives around caring facilities or caring duties is also very important. That's the whole basis of the foundation economy. You know, can you nip out of work to make somebody a sandwich, that sort of thing, right. or do you actually have to give up work because there is nothing suitable? So all those things come into play in terms of the support that can be offered to people that are supporting family members. And I also would mention that there's some superb work going on in our schools supporting young carers as well. And at some point it would be good to try and get something on that. Because you know, as I've historically spoken to some of those, and the schools are very, very supportive, very innovative in the way in which they identify and support their young carers. But anyway, so Gwyn has seconded it. Everybody's been in agreement of it. So so yes, thanks, Eddie. That's taken forward.
Thank you.
And then so agenda item 15 is any items that I've decided are urgent. Well, I have none. So on that, we do have a part 2 item, as Mark's mentioned earlier, which means that we have to move into private session, and I will therefore ask Democratic Services Officer if we can stop the live stream and the recording, and ensure that anybody who is not able to remain in the meeting has left.